On Christmas Eve, Fritz and Mary were looking forward to unpacking their presents. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was their uncle with a bunch of gifts in his hands. The children were very happy to see him. Then they began to unpack the presents. Mary got fancy dolls, toy dishes, and a beautiful silk dress. Fritz also got what he wanted, a magnificent horse and a mouse king. Mary noticed that there was a soldier under the tree. It was the Nutcracker, designed to neatly crunch hard nuts. The girl really liked it. But Fritz said it was his gift and tried to take it from his sister. The children stretched the Nutcracker so far that they tore his arm off. The broken toy became unnecessary for the boy. Mary was very upset and burst into tears. But my uncle was able to repair the soldier. The girl was happy and hugged him gently. The day was very busy, so she soon got tired and fell asleep right under the tree. During her sleep, Mary heard strange sounds. They were like mouse fuss. The girl opened her eyes. The objects in the house seemed much larger than they were. And the tree under which she fell asleep became absolutely gigantic. Mary realized that it was not the objects that had increased, but that she had decreased. Suddenly, the Mouse King with his army appeared before the eyes of the astonished girl. Mary was very frightened and wanted to run away. But the giant mice stopped her. And then a miracle happened. The Nutcracker jumped to his feet and grabbed the girl. They instantly climbed the tree to the bookshelf, and along it got to Fritz's toys. There was a whole collection of tin soldiers. The Nutcracker called for help. The soldiers immediately jumped to their feet and ran after him. The Nutcracker took command of the army, and the soldiers began to fight the army of the Mouse King. The battle between toys and mice was fierce. But, unfortunately, there were too many mice, and the Nutcracker army began to suffer defeat. Mary saw this and ran out of her hiding place. She threw her shoe at the Mouse King and hit him right in the head, and he fell to the floor unconscious. The rest of the mice realized that the battle was lost and ran away in all directions. Mary ran to the Nutcracker, but he lay unconscious, as he was badly wounded by the Mouse King. The girl thought that he was dead and began to cry bitterly. And suddenly, a beautiful fairy appeared behind Mary. She decided to help the girl. With a wave of her wand, she revived the Nutcracker. With a second wave of her wand, the fairy turned the soldier into a handsome prince. Mary and Nutcracker looked at each other with loving eyes and could not take their eyes off. With a wave of her wand for the third time, the fairy took the couple in love to the kingdom of sweets. The trees there were made of candy, and the flowers were made of marmalade. It was a wonderful place. Mary closed her eyes for a second in pleasure. And suddenly, she heard the voice of her mother, who called her by name. Opening her eyes, the girl saw her mother, who looked at her in confusion. Mary also could not understand what was happening. The girl told about her wonderful journey, but her mother only smiled sweetly. Then Mary saw the pewter Nutcracker in her arms. And then she realized that she had slept under the tree all night, and everything that happened to her was just a vivid dream. A few years later, the nephew of their godfather came to visit Mary and Fritz. As soon as he entered the house, the girl almost fell to the floor in surprise. The boy looked like the Nutcracker as 2 drops of water. He also liked Mary at first sight. After some time, they got married, and lived no worse than in the magic kingdom of sweets. Doomed by fate to lead a hectic life, Lemuel Gulliver again set off on a voyage on the adventure ship 2 months after returning home. But as soon as the ship passed the Strait of Madagascar, a storm overtook it. Strong gusts of wind carried the ship to an unknown land. When the sailors saw the land, they decided to inspect it and collect fresh water. Gulliver went down to the shore with the sailors, and the crew scattered across the island. Not finding water, Gulliver decided to return to the shore. But as soon as he approached the ocean, he saw that the sailors had abandoned him. They were sailing away in full sail from the huge giant who was chasing them. Frightened, Gulliver rushed into the interior of the island. He ran to a barley field with huge ears and realized that he was in the land of giants. Gulliver sat down to rest. But before he had time to catch his breath, he noticed a huge foot that was about to step on him. Gulliver started screaming as loudly as he could. And the giant noticed him. He lifted Gulliver with his hand, examined him intently, and carried the little man to the owner farmer. The farmer tried to speak to Gulliver, but his voice was so loud that it deafened the little man. Then the owner brought Gulliver home. At the house, the farmer's family was preparing for dinner. The little man was seated on a table where gigantic pieces of beef and bread lay. But before Gulliver had time to break off his bread, the farmer's son grabbed it upside down and began to shake it. He mistook Gulliver for a toy and tried to put it in his mouth. Then the father loudly threatened his son and asked him to treat the little man more carefully. Later, the farmer's 9-year-old daughter made a bed for Gulliver, sewed clothes for him, and even taught him the language of the giants. The girl gave Gulliver the name Grildrig, which meant dwarf. He called her a nanny. Gulliver aroused great interest among other giants, so the farmer began to show him at fairs for money. But frequent performances undermined Gulliver's health. Then the farmer happily sold the little man to the queen. So Gulliver moved to the palace and became the darling of the royal family. However, the court dwarf, who was no longer considered the smallest man in the kingdom, disliked Gulliver and ruined his life in every possible way. Once, when Gulliver was strolling through the garden, the dwarf began to coward the apple tree. And Gulliver had to escape from the falling giant apples.
Oh no!
And on another occasion, an agile dwarf pushed Gulliver into a huge jug of cream. And only the cook, who entered on time, saved the little man from inevitable death. But it wasn't just because of the dwarf that Gulliver got into trouble. So one morning during breakfast he was grabbed by the cook monkey. Like a cub, she began to rock Gulliver, and then dragged him to the roof. The giants rushed to save the little man. And as soon as they climbed onto the roof, the monkey threw Gulliver off. Fortunately, he managed to catch onto the shingles and was safely rescued. In general, Gulliver's life in the kingdom was happy. He often accompanied the queen on her travels. They even made a special travel box for him. And once on another such trip, the servant brought the box with Gulliver out to the sea so that the little man could enjoy the fresh air. But then a shadow began to flicker over Gulliver's head. A sea eagle flying past noticed prey in a box. He grabbed the ring on the lid of the chest with his beak and carried Gulliver over the ocean. At some point, the bird released the box, and the captive found himself in the open sea. Gulliver barely managed to open the top hatch. He started shouting and waving his handkerchief. Finally, he was spotted from the ship and helped to get out. So, after all the adventures, Gulliver returned to England again. For a long time, he could not get used to objects and people of normal size. And Gulliver's wife, frightened that he had gone mad, strictly forbade her husband to think about traveling.